December 7, 1941. The Japanese battleship Nagato anchored in Hiroshima Bay. It is almost 3 in the morning, Japan Standard Time. The lights in the operations room are dim. On the other side of the dateline, 4,000 miles to the east, on an island the Nagato's charts label Oahu, territory of Hawaii. The sun has not yet risen. It never will, not on the same world. The man at the center of the room is 57 years old. He is small, 5 feet 3 inches, 128 pounds. He is wearing his white dress uniform because tonight, even here, appearances matter. He has been awake since midnight. He will not sleep again for 2 days. His name is Isoroku Yamamoto, and he is the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Japanese Combined Fleet. He has spent the better part of a year planning the operation now unfolding 4,000 miles away. The largest carrier-based airstrike in history. 353 aircraft launched from 6 fleet carriers, descending in 2 waves on the United States Pacific Fleet at anchor. He designed it. He threatened to resign if they refused to approve it. He signed the orders, and now he is waiting for a signal that the thing he helped set in motion has begun. I want to be clear about something before we go further. The version of this moment that most people know, Yamamoto watching the attack unfold with grim satisfaction, then murmuring that he fears they've awakened a sleeping giant, is at best disputed. The quote appears in the 1970 film Tora, 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 attributed to him by a screenwriter. Most historians believe he either never said it or said something considerably less cinematic. But here is the thing. It doesn't matter, because the sentiment is accurate. He had written those exact words, in different form over different years to different people, long before December 7th. The famous quote is fiction. The fear behind it was not. At 3:19 a.m. Japan Standard Time, the signal arrived. 3 words in Morse code repeated: Tora, 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 tiger, tiger, tiger. It meant complete surprise had been achieved. The officers around him burst into congratulations. There were men weeping, men embracing. This was, for the Imperial Japanese Navy, the fulfillment of years of preparation, the culmination of a strategic gamble larger than anything Japan had attempted since Tsushima. Yamamoto said almost nothing. Later messages would confirm what he had feared most. The American aircraft carriers were not at Pearl Harbor. They had been at sea when the strike force arrived. The fuel depots, the repair shops, the dry docks, the permanent infrastructure that would allow the United States to rebuild faster than he could hurt them, had not been targeted in the attack. The tactical success was extraordinary. The strategic problem it was meant to solve had not been solved. This is the moment I keep returning to. The attack worked. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It destroyed the battleship fleet. It bought Japan 6 months of operational freedom in the Pacific. And Yamamoto knew in the same moment that it had not been enough. The carriers were missing. The fuel tanks were intact. The industrial engine that would eventually build the ships and planes that would grind Japan apart was undamaged. He had won the morning and lost the war, and he knew it at 3:19 a.m. on December 7th, 1941. I find that almost unbearable. To be that right, that fast, in the moment of your greatest success. What no one in that operations room knew, what Japan would not understand for almost 2 more years, was that the man who planned that morning had been telling them, in letters, in speeches, in classified memoranda, in direct warnings to prime ministers, what was going to happen next. He had been telling them for 20 years. To understand what Yamamoto was carrying in that operations room, on that morning, you have to go back. You have to go all the way back to a young naval officer who arrived in Boston with almost no money, a wife he had barely had time to meet, and a mission that nobody in the Imperial Japanese Navy fully understood yet. You have to go back to Cambridge Street, Brookline, Massachusetts, 1919. A note before we continue. This is an educational history documentary. The events described are real. The language is specific because the subject demands it. The The narration you hear is AI-generated. The script, research, and all editorial decisions are human-authored. Historical photographs and archival materials come from the U.S. National Archives, the Naval History and Heritage Command, and Wikimedia Commons. All sources are public domain and listed in full in the description below. Please remember to like and subscribe. It truly matters to this old Grognard. Now, back to the story. April 1919. Isoroku Yamamoto is 35 years old. He has been married for 8 months to a woman named Reiko, the daughter of a dairy farmer from his hometown of Nagaoka. They had barely set up a household before his orders arrived. Wives did not accompany their husbands on these assignments. He sailed alone. He rented rooms in the Boston suburb of Brookline and enrolled at Harvard University as a special student in economics with a secondary focus on petroleum sources. His English was functional but not fluent. He slept 3 hours a night. He read everything he could find. When the semester ended, Yamamoto did something that the other Japanese officers posted to American universities rarely did. He hitchhiked. He spent his summers on the road, moving through a country he was being paid to understand. He used his poker winnings, and poker had become a serious second income, to fund journeys that took him through the industrial spine of the most powerful nation on earth. He saw the steel mills of Pittsburgh producing more tonnage in a week than Japan's entire annual output. He walked through the oil refineries of Texas, toured the fields in Mexico during one vacation, and returned with notebooks full of production figures that he had gathered the way a military intelligence officer would, systematically, without sentiment, with the specific purpose of understanding what these resources would mean in a war. Japan was an island nation of 70 million people with almost no domestic oil, no significant iron ore, no rubber, and an industrial base that, by every measure he could apply, was a fraction of what he was observing in the factories and fields of the American Midwest. The United States was a continental nation of over 100 million people, sitting on top of the largest oil reserves in the Western world. With an industrial capacity that was not just greater than Japan's, it was of a fundamentally different kind. American production did not depend on imported raw materials. American factories did not need to worry about supply lines stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. American workers were producing, in peacetime, more steel and more oil than Japan could consume in a decade of war. He filed his reports. He wrote his analyses. He told people what he had seen. Some of them listened politely. Most of them continued to believe what they had already decided to believe: that Japanese spirit, Japanese discipline, Japanese military tradition would prove sufficient against whatever material advantages an enemy could bring to bear. Yamamoto knew better. He had seen the material. He got a C+ in English at Harvard. I find this detail important for reasons I can't entirely explain. It suggests that what he learned in America wasn't in the classroom. It was on the road. He was a graduate of Japan's most rigorous naval academy, a veteran of Tsushima, a man who could memorize 5,000 Japanese ideographs. He barely passed English, but he came home knowing more about American industrial capacity than any Japanese admiral of his generation. The classroom wasn't where the education happened. What Yamamoto saw on those summer trips was not the America of diplomatic receptions and naval attaché dinners. It was the America of scale, the America of production, the America that most Japanese military planners, when they thought about a future war, had decided to disregard. He came back with a sentence that he would repeat for the next 20 years, in different forms, to different audiences. Anyone who has seen the auto factories in Detroit and the oil fields in Texas knows that Japan lacks the national power for a naval race with America. He said it to his superiors. He said it to school children in 1940 directly. Japan cannot beat America. Therefore, Japan should not fight America. He said it to prime ministers. Nobody changed course. There is one more thing about Harvard that almost never gets mentioned, and I think it matters more than the oil fields and the steel mills. Yamamoto learned poker, not casually. The way he always learned things, obsessively, systematically, staying up through the night until he understood the game at a structural level. He became, by most accounts, an extraordinary player. He played against American naval officers when he later served as naval attaché in Washington, and reportedly developed what one source describes as a certain contempt for the mental agility of his American opponents at the table. This is the detail that I think unlocks Pearl Harbor, and I don't think enough historians take it seriously. Yamamoto understood poker not as a card game, but as a model for decision-making under uncertainty. Half calculation, half luck. The bluff. The early aggressive bet to blow the strongest player out before they can build their stack. He said this explicitly to his staff officers. He put tax on the chairs of people he thought weren't thinking hard enough and forced them to play poker to learn about surprise and deception. Pearl Harbor wasn't just a military operation. It was a poker play, the largest all-in bet in naval history, by a man who understood that Japan could not win a long game, and so was trying to end the game before it began. He was right about the logic. He was wrong about whether it would work. But before we get to the war he spent 20 years trying to prevent, there is something about the man himself that the official record almost never shows. In the geisha houses of Tokyo, they called him 80 sen. A manicure cost 1 yen, 100 sen. Yamamoto had 8 fingers. He had lost the middle and index fingers of his left hand at Tsushima in 1905, when a shell struck the Nishin and tore them away. The geishas charged by the finger. For Yamamoto, that was 80 sen. The joke was affectionate. He was irregular. He was known for his generosity, his calligraphy. He would decorate the walls of the houses he frequented with his brushwork, which was genuinely admired, and for a warmth and humor that his official portraits completely failed to convey. In 1933, at a party in Tokyo, he met a geisha named Kawai Chiyoko. She was in her late 20s. He was 49. She was, by every account, beguiling and funny, and sharper than most of the officers who courted her. They were together for 10 years. When he was at sea, which was most of the time, they wrote constantly. His wife Reiko bore him 4 children. On their 21st wedding anniversary, the day before he was named Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, Reiko was away. He did not mention it in his diary. The person he was closest to was not his wife. And when his funeral procession moved through Tokyo in 1943, it passed by Kawai's quarters on the way to the cemetery. I don't know what to do with that detail. It doesn't have a clean moral. It just has weight. He did not drink alcohol. Even a small amount turned his face crimson and made him ill. But he had a powerful sweet tooth and enjoyed fine cigars, and he gambled the way other men breathe, constantly, on anything that could be quantified. Bridge, poker, shogi, go, billiards, mahjong. He had once remarked that if his naval career ever ended badly, he would open a casino in Monaco. He had gambled in Havana. He had gambled in Siberia. His wife, Reiko, bore him 4 children, 2 sons, 2 daughters. He was rarely home. Between at-sea duties and the nightlife he genuinely preferred, the couple had spent less time together in 23 years of marriage than most couples spend in a month. On their 21st wedding anniversary, August 31, 1939, the day before he was named Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, Reiko was away. He did not mention it in his diary. The person he was closest to was not his wife. In the summer of 1933, at a party in Tokyo, he met a geisha named Kawai Chiyoko. She was in her late 20s. He was 49. She was, by every account, beguiling and funny, and sharper than most of the officers who courted her. They did not fall into the relationship immediately. He tried to push her away after an awkward first encounter, but she kept appearing in his life, and eventually he stopped resisting. They were together for 10 years. They wrote constantly when he was at sea, which was most of the time. The letters Yamamoto sent her were unlike anything he wrote to Reiko or to his naval superiors, or to the prime ministers he briefed on the impossibility of defeating America. "To be honest," he wrote in one letter, "I feel utterly wretched working in Tokyo. The other night I dreamed that we were driving along the coast of Nice in the south of France. I thought how happy I'd be if only it were true." In another, "Today too I ache for you, calling your name again and again and pressing kisses upon your picture." He kept her photograph on his desk aboard the Yamato. His wife Reiko gave an interview in 1954, 11 years after his death, in which he told the Japanese public that Yamamoto had been closer to Kawai Chiyoko than to her. This was not a bitter accusation. It was stated as a plain fact by a woman who had had 23 years to arrive at her conclusions. His son Tadao, attending his father's funeral in 1943, asked Navy officers to tell him something about his father, because he knew so little. The funeral procession passed by Kawai's quarters on the way to the cemetery. "I don't know what to do with that detail either. The greatest naval commander Japan has ever produced, dying in a jungle clearing in the Solomon Islands, being carried past the window of the woman he actually loved on the way to be buried. It doesn't have a clean moral. It just has weight." May 27, 1905. Ensign Isoroku Yamamoto is 21 years old, aboard the cruiser Nishin, somewhere in the Tsushima Strait between Japan and Korea. The Russian Baltic Fleet, 38 warships that had sailed 18,000 miles from the Baltic Sea, around Africa, and across the Indian Ocean to relieve the Japanese siege of Port Arthur, is directly in front of him. Admiral Togo Heihachiro, commanding the Japanese force from his flagship Mikasa, has placed his fleet between the Russians and their destination, in a maneuver that naval historians still argue about. A hard turn across the enemy's front, the T crossed in textbook fashion. Every Japanese gun bearing, while only the Russian vanguard can reply. The Nishin is part of the protective screen. Yamamoto is at his battle station. A shell struck his position. He was knocked unconscious. When he came to, he was wounded in the right leg, and 2 fingers of his left hand were gone. He spent 2 months in a hospital in Sasebo and would carry the scars for the rest of his life. The battle lasted 2 days. 21 Russian ships were sunk, 6 were captured, 3 escaped. 4,500 Russian sailors were dead. The Japanese lost 3 torpedo boats and 117 men. It was the most complete naval victory in modern history. It was also the lesson that almost destroyed Japan 40 years later. This is the part of the story that I find most troubling. Tsushima taught the Imperial Japanese Navy one lesson: that spirit, training, and decisive action could overcome numerical disadvantage. That Japan could punch above its weight by attacking boldly. The lesson was real. Togo's T-crossing was genuinely brilliant. The problem was what the Japanese Navy decided the lesson meant. They built their entire strategic culture on it. The great decisive battle, the knockout blow, the willingness to gamble everything on a single decisive engagement. Yamamoto understood this lesson better than anyone. He used it to design Pearl Harbor. And he also understood better than anyone why it wouldn't work against the United States. Because the United States would not stop after one defeat. Because America was not Russia, far from home, on the wrong end of a supply line. Because the United States had, as of 1941, 15 times Japan's industrial capacity and a continent that no one could bomb. Tsushima produced the doctrine. Yamamoto tried to warn them that the doctrine had a ceiling. He failed. The boy who graduated second in his class out of 300 candidates, the son of an impoverished schoolteacher in Nagaoka, the 6th son, named for his father's age at birth, 56. Isoroku. He had come from almost nothing. He would rise to command the largest naval force in the history of his nation, and he would spend 38 years, from Tsushima in 1905 to Bougainville in 1943, trying to prevent the war he knew he would be ordered to fight. In 1925, Yamamoto received flight training at Kasumigaura at 40 years old. a remarkable age to learn to fly. He mastered it with characteristic stubbornness and emerged convinced that naval aviation, not the great battleships that dominated Imperial Japanese Navy doctrine, would determine the outcome of the next war. In 1926, he was posted to Washington as Japan's naval attaché. He had a better grasp of American industrial capacity than almost anyone in the Japanese government. Now he was living inside the capital of the country he had spent years warning his superiors about. He played poker with American naval officers. He was, by most accounts, better than they were. He used the games as a form of intelligence gathering, not for secrets, but for temperament. He was assessing how they thought under pressure, how they managed uncertainty, whether they were the kind of players who would fold when the pot got big or the kind who would push harder. He did not like what he found. I've read various accounts of Yamamoto's Washington years, and one thread runs through all of them. He developed something approaching contempt for the complacency of American military leadership. Not for American industry, which he continued to regard with something close to awe. Not for the American people, whom he seems to have genuinely liked. But for the officers he played poker with. For the institutional ease, the assumption that nothing too terrible could happen. He thought they were soft. He thought they were not paying attention. And he was right, in December 1941, when he caught them entirely by surprise at Pearl Harbor. What he didn't account for was that American officers who are paying attention and fighting for their survival are a categorically different thing. He knew this too, rationally. That's what makes the whole story so strange. He knew they would wake up. He knew what they would do when they woke up. He designed the attack anyway. He filed his reports. He wrote his analyses. He returned to Japan in 1928 with 2 years of direct observation of the American military and political establishment in his notebooks. In 1936, he became Vice Minister of the Navy. His position gave him real power and gave the militarists a real enemy. He opposed the alliance with Germany. He opposed the invasion of China. He publicly told subordinates that battleships were like elaborate religious scrolls which old people hang up in their homes, of no proved worth, purely a matter of faith. He was so outspoken that by the late 1930s, the nationalist faction had put him on a list. Not a promotion list. By 1939, Isoroku Yamamoto was Japan's most prominent opponent of war with the United States, and the most prominent target of the ultra-nationalist movement that wanted that war. Death threats arrived at the Navy Ministry with enough regularity that his superiors began to take them seriously. There were specific plots against his life. Army officers regarded him as a traitor to Japanese values for his pro-Western views and his opposition to the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy. The Navy's solution was to send him to sea. In August 1939, 3 days before Germany invaded Poland, Yamamoto was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet aboard the Nagato. The posting was partly an honor and partly a precaution. He was, quite literally, safer at sea. I find it almost impossible to read this period without a kind of cognitive vertigo. The man who, within 2 years, would plan and execute the largest naval airstrike in history was being protected from assassination by his own government because he didn't want to fight. He was the commander of Japan's fleet. He was also, simultaneously, trying to prevent the war that fleet would fight. The Navy sent him to sea to keep him from being killed by the Army. The irony is too neat to be fictional, and yet there it is, documented, in the autumn of 1939. In January 1941, Yamamoto wrote a letter to Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi. It outlined, for the first time in writing, his idea for a preemptive carrier strike on the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. The letter was 6 pages long. It was not an enthusiastic call to arms. It was a clinical assessment of a desperate option. The logic was poker logic. Japan could not win a long war against the United States. American industrial capacity was too great. American oil reserves were too vast. The longer the war went, the more certain Japan's defeat. Therefore, if war was going to happen, and by January 1941 it was clearly going to happen, regardless of what Yamamoto wanted, the only rational play was to strike so hard at the beginning that America would be unable to project naval power in the Pacific for long enough to give Japan time to build a defensive perimeter. It wouldn't win the war. Yamamoto was explicit about this. It would win time, and time was the only resource Japan had. The Naval General Staff rejected the plan, twice. Yamamoto threatened to resign the command if they continued to refuse. He did not want to fight this war, but if the war was going to happen, this was the only play he could see. They approved it in October 1941. The attack force sailed in late November under complete radio silence. And on December 7th, as we know, the signal came back. Tora, Tora, Tora. I've spent a long time trying to understand what the threat to resign actually meant. My conclusion is this: he was not bluffing. He genuinely believed this was the only rational option in a situation he could not prevent. He also genuinely knew it would not be enough. He forced through a plan he designed with exquisite professional skill, knowing it would lose the war he was fighting to start. "353 Japanese aircraft in 2 waves had done what Yamamoto designed them to do. 8 American battleships were sunk or badly damaged. 11 other ships were hit. 188 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 2,335 American servicemen dead. By any tactical measure, it was a catastrophic American defeat. The Pacific Fleet's battleship force was effectively destroyed, and Yamamoto, receiving the damage reports, immediately saw what was missing. The USS Enterprise, the USS Lexington, the USS Saratoga, not at Pearl Harbor, at sea, untouched. 3 fleet carriers, the ships he had built his entire strategic concept around destroying, had sailed before his strike force arrived. The attack had sunk the battleships that Yamamoto himself had said were obsolete. It had left intact the weapons of naval aviation that he had spent 20 years telling the Imperial Navy were the only ones that mattered. He had destroyed what he didn't need to destroy. He had failed to destroy what he needed to destroy. Vice Admiral Nagumo, commanding the strike force, decided not to launch a 3rd wave. The fuel depots, the dry docks, the repair facilities, the permanent infrastructure of Pearl Harbor were untouched. Military historians have argued for 80 years about whether a 3rd wave would have made a decisive difference. My reading of the evidence is probably not decisive, but it would have pushed the American timeline for recovery back by months. Yamamoto thought they should have hit them. Nagumo pulled his fleet back. The 2 men's relationship deteriorated. It would never fully recover. Back in Japan, Yamamoto became overnight the most celebrated military figure in the country. Fan mail arrived in quantities his staff had never seen. Women sent him gifts. Newspapers called him the hero of the age. He wrote to Chiyoko from the Yamato, "I am longing only for letters from you night and day." He was not writing about the fan mail. In the 6 months that followed Pearl Harbor, Japan did exactly what Yamamoto had said it would do. It ran wild. The Philippines fell. Malaya fell. Singapore, the great British fortress that Churchill called the Gibraltar of the East, fell in 7 days. Burma fell. The Dutch East Indies fell. Japan's empire stretched from the Aleutian Islands in the north to the border of Australia in the south. It was the largest territorial expansion in the history of Asia, achieved in less time than most military campaigns in modern history. Yamamoto had predicted all of it. He had told Prime Minister Konoe in October 1941 that he could run wild considerably for the first 6 months or a year. He had also told Konoe what came next. After that, I have utterly no confidence. June 4th, 1942, 6 months and 3 days after Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto's plan at Midway was to do what he had failed to do at Pearl Harbor, to lure the American carrier fleet into a decisive engagement and destroy it. The plan was elaborate. It was also compromised before the first shot was fired. American codebreakers had read Japanese naval ciphers. Admiral Nimitz knew the plan. He was waiting. In the span of 6 minutes on the morning of June 4th, American dive bombers sank 3 Japanese fleet carriers, the Akagi, the Kaga, and the Soryu. The Hiryu was sunk hours later. 4 of Japan's finest fleet carriers, with their experienced air crews, went to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in a single day. It was over. Not the war. The war would last 3 more years. But Japan's ability to project offensive naval power in the Pacific was gone. The question had shifted from whether Japan could win to how long it would take America to win. Yamamoto was aboard the Yamato at Midway, commanding from the super battleship he had once tried to prevent being built. He was suffering from intestinal cramps and sweating through his uniform. He was heartsick about Chiyoko's illness. She had come down with a severe lung infection weeks earlier, and their last goodbye at a train station in Kure was, though neither knew it, their final one. He was waiting for reports that arrived wrong. I've read accounts of those hours aboard the Yamato, and what stays with me is the specific texture of that kind of knowledge. He had known this was coming. He had designed the operation knowing that if the codes were broken, if the Americans were waiting, it would fail catastrophically. The codes were broken. They were waiting. 6 minutes. 4 carriers. His prediction came true in the worst possible way. On schedule, as he had said it would. After Midway, Yamamoto knew what he was managing. Not a campaign of conquest, a campaign of delay. Every island battle, every air engagement, every night torpedo run in the slot between the islands of the Solomons. These were not battles Japan was winning. They were battles Japan was losing more slowly than America wanted. He kept his opinions private. He wrote them to his closest friends. In March 1943, he wrote to Admiral Teikichi Hori, his oldest friend from the Naval Academy. I sense that my life must be completed in the next 100 days. He wrote that with 35 days left to live. In April 1943, Yamamoto decided to conduct a series of personal inspection tours of Japanese air bases in the Solomon Islands. His staff warned him that the visits were dangerous. American air power had been growing, and the routes were within fighter range of American-controlled airfields. He overruled them. His schedule was encrypted and transmitted over Japanese naval radio. The Americans, who had been reading Japanese naval ciphers for years, read it. Admiral Nimitz authorized an interception mission. The date was set, April 18, 1943. There is a detail about Operation Vengeance, the American mission to kill Yamamoto, that I find devastating and that usually gets lost in the tactical narrative. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox asked Admiral Nimitz directly, "Do you know for certain it's him?" Nimitz confirmed it. Knox asked whether they should proceed with the assassination of a named enemy commander. Nimitz said yes. Knox approved it. I don't think this was a close call, morally or legally. Yamamoto was a legitimate military target, and the intelligence value of eliminating the combined fleet's commander was real. But I find the specificity of it haunting. They knew exactly who was on that plane. They targeted him by name. In a war of millions, on an April morning in the Solomons, one man was singled out by name, on a schedule he had published himself, and killed by an air force whose existence he had spent 20 years predicting. 16 P-38 Lightnings took off from Guadalcanal in the pre-dawn dark of April 18, 1943. They flew at low altitude to avoid detection, a 400-mile round trip at wave height, below radar. Major John Mitchell, their commanding officer, navigated by compass and clock alone, with no radio contact. At 9:34 a.m., they arrived at their intercept point above the southern coast of Bougainville Island, having flown the precise course and timing required to meet Yamamoto's transport plane at the precise moment his published itinerary said he would be there. 2 Mitsubishi Betty bombers appeared, with a Zero fighter escort. The lightnings climbed into the attack. Captain Thomas Lanphier fired on Yamamoto's aircraft. The port engine caught fire. The plane began to descend. It went into the jungle at low altitude and tore itself apart against the trees. Isoroku Yamamoto was dead before the wreckage stopped moving. 2 .50 caliber bullets, one through the jaw, one through the shoulder. Medical personnel who later examined him concluded he had been killed almost instantly. A Japanese search party found him the next morning. He was still strapped in his seat, which had been thrown clear of the wreckage. His white-gloved hands gripped the hilt of his samurai sword, a sword he had never drawn in combat. His posture was described in the recovery report as one of great dignity. He had left the base at Rabaul with a meticulously published schedule, on a route within range of American fighters, against the advice of his staff. He died on the schedule he had published himself. He died by the air power he had built. He was killed by codebreakers doing exactly what he had done on the road in Texas in 1919, reading an enemy's systems with more attention than the enemy thought necessary. The war ended on the schedule Yamamoto had set. Not 6 months, not a year. 2 years and 8 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan surrendered. Nearly every major Japanese city had been reduced to rubble by American air power. The Imperial Japanese Navy, the institution Yamamoto had commanded and loved, and whose limitations he had understood better than any of its admirals, effectively ceased to exist. The atomic bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the final expression of the American industrial and scientific capacity that Yamamoto had spent his adult life trying to make Japan understand it could not defeat. Yamamoto's hometown of Nagaoka was firebombed on the night of August 1st, 1945, 5 days before Hiroshima. Not because it had strategic value, not because it was his hometown. It was on a list, a city-sized item on a systematic targeting program. The town that named him for the number 56, the place where a poor schoolteacher's son had passed second out of 300, was burned to the ground in a war he had spent 20 years trying to prevent. I've been thinking for a long time about the answer to the question this episode has been building toward. Why? Why did the man who knew everything still do it? And I don't think the answer is duty, though duty was real. I don't think it's patriotism, though that was real too. I think the answer is something harder to name. He was a gambler, not in the casual sense, but in the deepest sense. He believed that you could calculate probability, and he calculated the probability of every option available to Japan in 1941, and the least terrible outcome required Pearl Harbor. Not to win, to lose as slowly as possible. To make the eventual American victory expensive enough that Japan might negotiate from something other than total humiliation. It was the largest fold or raise decision in the history of naval warfare, and he pushed all of his chips in, knowing the odds. He played the cards he had. The house won. Kawai Chiyoko never remarried. She outlived the war, outlived the occupation, outlived the reconstruction. She gave one interview, late in her life, in which she confirmed what Reiko had already said publicly, that the bond between her and Yamamoto had been real and had lasted until the end. His son Tadao, at the funeral in 1943, asked Navy officers to tell him something about his father because he knew so little. The funeral procession passed her quarters on the way to the cemetery. He was 58 years old. He had told them it would happen. He had told them, in letters and speeches and classified memoranda and direct warnings to prime ministers, with a precision that the historical record confirms in detail, exactly what the United States would do. He was right about everything. He was obeyed about nothing. And the war ran on the schedule of the man who had begged them not to start it. Thank you for watching. If this is the kind of history you're looking for, subscribe. There's always another story waiting. The next documentary starts right after this one.